Canada's temporary foreign worker program. As I mentioned in part one, I think this is actually a major issue because so many of us as Canadians have noticed this, but we're absolutely terrified to talk about this openly. And I think that we as Canadians need to be talking just about the number of temporary foreign workers, international students that we see, say, out of Tim Hortons, at fast food chains, at restaurants, at customer service. And the reason why I've always wanted to cover this again is not out of one of racism or xenophobia. I've mentioned this before. There's not a racist bone in my body, and this isn't about being xenophobic. This is a real issue. This is a big issue for Canada. And in this video, there's a few things I want to chat about because I think it's absolutely important that we get some of the data or as much of the data grounded so we can actually have conversations about this moving forward. And, I mentioned in part one that, there's the temporary foreign worker program, and then there's the international mobility program where the government of Canada, they got rid of a labor market impact assessment, meaning in 2014, the, there's no longer a reason why employers now need to tell the government that they can't fill jobs because Canadians aren't applying. You see, that's a requirement of the temporary foreign worker program that employers have to tell the government Canadians aren't applying, so I have to go to other countries. That's no longer the case. And that international mobility program has tripled the number of temporary foreign worker permit holders here in Canada. And so there is a race to acquire more cheap, maybe not cheap is the wrong word because they are still paid what a Canadian would get paid, but there is a race towards labor that is not Canadian, if it's a weird way of saying that. And this has sparked a lot of controversy. I'll tell you honestly, like, you guys know in my comments, you see it all the time. There's a lot of people who have had such different experiences with this. And I really want us to talk about this openly from a respect level, right? Like, I want us to be very respectful, talk about this openly where we can engage in respectful dialogue. Because I just want to also preface this that, like, look, if we were living in these countries, I'm sure all of us would be applying to come to Canada as fast as we could to get out of there. So I want this conversation to be policy driven because at the end of the day, there's real costs to what the government's doing. And the government may not even realize the costs, or maybe they do, and it's part of a bigger plan, which some of you have mentioned. But I want to put this out there to all of you who are watching, and especially those who are employers, those who hire. Um, Let me know. There have been so many conflicting comments and DMs that I've received that Canadians are applying for jobs and are getting passed up for temporary foreign workers. Can someone let me know in the chat if in fact that's real, if in fact that's happening? Let me know in the chat below. If you are an employer, if you have seen that Canadians are being passed up for jobs and instead temporary foreign workers are being hired. Let me know in the chat below. If you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe. My name is Christopher Balkrin, folks. I live here in Toronto. I'm a first generation immigrant, lived in Toronto my entire life. Pretty much I came here when I was 2 with my family. And I'm truly committed to open and honest dialogue and curiosity about some of our biggest topics. I also created the Open Minds podcast. So if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely do. Open Minds with Christopher Balkrin. This Tuesday drops one of my favorite episodes on a favorite topic of mine, medical assistance in dying. So if you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe. But again, if you are an employer in Canada, let me know if you have experienced your your company hiring temporary foreign workers instead of Canadians. That's one thing that people keep telling me. The other thing people keep telling me is that um, people keep telling me that they can't seem to get jobs, that they're applying to all types of jobs and they're not getting it. And it's because there's unfair hiring practices, that employers are unfairly hiring temporary foreign workers, international students, instead of Canadians. So let me know in the comments below if you agree or if you have experience, because I've been receiving so many different comments on both sides. And here's a third side that I want us also to discuss. And that is, some employers have messaged me saying, "Hey, listen, um, I hire temporary foreign workers because of their work ethic, because of, I tell them to come in at 6 a.m. and they're here at 6 a.m. They never miss a shift. They're always here on time. And with Canadians, I haven't had that experience." Again, vast generalizations on Canadians and temporary foreign workers, but I want to know if that holds resonance as well. So let me know in the comments below if any of those statements that I've mentioned are true. One, do you think that temporary foreign workers, there's unfair hiring practices, that employers are choosing temporary foreign workers? Let me know, over Canadians. And second, do you think that Canadians are lazy? And that's what's being proposed by some employers, that they'd rather hire temporary foreign workers than Canadians. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe. This is the only place, I believe, in the internet where Canadians, we can come together, we can talk about big, big topics without fear of repercussion, because this is a place where we can engage in truly honest and open discourse without fear of someone, being persecuted. So again, share my live, invite your friends, tell everyone to come here. This is the place where we can engage again in respectful dialogue, open dialogue. I'm not here, "Hey, Katya, nice to see you." I'm not here to like push aside or anything, but we're here to understand a little bit more about what's happening in our society today. Canada, look, 5%, and I don't know if this is true, but it probably is, if these stats are up to date. 5% of our entire labor market force are temporary foreign workers. 5%. Now, here in Toronto, I'm sure all of us have opinions on whether or not that's 5, 50, 60, 70%. But on as a nation, 5% are temporary foreign workers. And apparently in Europe, it's 6.4 to 7%, some cases 8% are temporary foreign workers. So relatively speaking, Canada, we're not as much temporary foreign workers as other countries. But as I've mentioned at the outset, the policy of the government is to facilitate more temporary foreign workers into Canada. That seems to be the policy. It has been the policy at least of the past 10 years, and it probably will be moving forward. And the question I have is why? Why would the government, knowing that unemployment here in Canada is tipping upwards? Interestingly enough, the CBC last year did a great YouTube video on this. It's called "Is Our Addiction to Cheap Foreign Labor Hurting Young People?" And they specifically pointed to the fact that the unemployment rate amongst Gen Z is high. I think it's around 12%, which is double the unemployment rate for those that are in higher age brackets. And so we're seeing that the government is increasing temporary foreign workers, increasing international mobility program permit holders, despite our unemployment of our young people being very high, relatively speaking. So, gonna pause there, see if anybody has any questions. Let me know in the chat. Again, if you are a employer, if you are an employee, if you've experienced any of this, if you are a temporary foreign worker, let me know. I would love to have you join the chat and let's discuss this more openly. Um, I think it's also important that we talk about a few things, and I've mentioned this a bit yesterday. So if you haven't already, check out my live stream from yesterday. But Ipsos read, thank you, Katja. Folks, if you haven't, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, tell all your friends, tell everyone you know. Share this live as far and wide as you can. Katya is loving the live stream. Um, Here's something interesting as well. And Canada, we're in a very unique situation here. Our unique situation is that 90% of newcomers say Canada as a whole feels welcoming. 90%, 90. And 85% say Canadian businesses as well. So Canada and Canadian businesses are very much welcoming to newcomers. The General Social Survey, which was done in 2020, shows immigrants report strong or very strong belonging in Ontario as well as in Atlantic Canada. So, from coast to coast, Canada remains one of the only countries in the world with a high sense of connected identity among newcomers, especially compared to the native born populations. Even the Aga Khan said Canada is, quote, the most successful pluralist society on the face of our globe. And that is something that we should all be proud of. But of course, it comes with challenges. As the government has increased the number of temporary foreign workers and international students, this has led to what we have discussed on this channel before, which is clustering. Clustering of immigrants in specific areas leading to forms of discrimination, forms of racism, etc., perhaps even rising xenophobia. I'll give you a stat. In Germany, these are also really interesting stats from Germany and France. Germany, 64% of Black immigrants in EU wide surveys report racial discrimination, double the EU average. One third of skilled foreign workers left Germany due to rising xenophobia, directly undermining the economy. So that's very interesting. The French National Human Rights Commission noted that rising xenophobia and anti immigrant sentiment, with tolerance scores dropping significantly, even amongst college educated citizens. Um, and so, very interesting that that's happening. Um, and then also, Italy, Spain, and the UK have reported reports of racist policing, targeted public discourse, and spikes in anti immigrant incidents, which have become more normalized and frequent in those countries. Very interesting. Some more info and stats from the European Union, which is also interesting. Here's a study, the 2019 Migration Observatory study from the University of Oxford, found that perceived cultural distance, more than race or religion, is the strongest driver of public discomfort with immigration. That is very interesting. 2019 Migration Observatory report from the University of Oxford found that perceived cultural distance. So the more immigrants, you know, show that they're not assimilating, that they're not taking on the norms of a culture, it's it's the strongest driver of public discomfort. Uh, Basically, quote, the more different immigrants are perceived to be, the less people believe they share common goals. So very interesting there. A UK-based Belong Network study in 2023 found 31% of adults rarely engage with people of different backgrounds. And rising social fragmentation is now the top concern for democratic health. So think about that. 31% of adults rarely engage with people of different backgrounds. 31%. Very interesting. Robert Putnam has long warned that diversity without trust, now this is interesting, diversity without trust can cause people to hunker down. They withdraw from public life, engage, and vote less. In 2007, Robert Putnam wrote, in the short run, immigration and ethnic diversity tend to reduce social solidarity and social capital. Huh. Um, this is very interesting to see, and I think it's very interesting. And this is the underbelly, perhaps, where we don't want to talk about. So, very interesting to see what's happening in the UK and in the European Union. Um, and so, again, we have to ask ourselves, the future of Canada, with the number of temporary foreign workers going to increase year over year, what will this mean for our country going forward? Um, and I'll tell you, folks, I mean, I see it all the time in the comment section. I see it all the time in the DMs. There's real sentiment that's very negative towards Indian immigrants in particular, Indian international students in particular. And I think it's a few factors. One, I don't think many Indian temporary foreign workers and international students, though they work very hard and have a very high work ethic, may necessarily be willing to provide that same work ethic in trying to understand the social norms of a society. They're not as willing to understand, for example, the norms of road laws, right? So, like, where you ride your bike, how you ride your bike, do you blow through intersections, what you do, you know, there's no willingness to understand cultural norms. And I know these are blanket statements, and it's not meant to be xenophobic, etc. Um, but a lot of temporary foreign workers, international students struggle with providing the same work ethic mindset to social integration. Katya says, I saw engineers, musicians, and scientists who are foreigners. They don't have any issues with integration. I think this is a big distinction we have to make. And it's very similar to my family, my parents. Um, when you're an economic immigrant, I feel like you have a much more long term horizon for your stay in a country, right? So if you are an economic immigrant, um, you know that you're building something here. You're building a life, you're building a family, you want your kids to build a life in their family. So there's much more of a horizon, long-term horizon view, like I want to live the rest of my years in Canada. Now, I would contrast that with a temporary foreign worker, an international student, say from India, hypothetical, where their coming to Canada is almost very transactional. In in the truest sense of the term, they're looking at this in terms of like, I need to get 2 years so that I can get permanent residency and maybe build a life. But really, for the first 2 years, my goal is just to get permanent residency. And so they think of everything as like, I just need to work extremely hard every single day, and this will all count towards my 2 years of residency here. So, unlike an economic immigrant who comes here and has to have a job and has a home and all these other things, the economic immigrant isn't thinking in a 2-year horizon. They're thinking of it like, I need to really fully adapt here because this is my new home. Whereas the international student, they're willing to take the chance, but it very well may not work out in their favor. But they're like just very singularly focused on the work. And I think that's a major difference. Again, if they were economic immigrants, um, they wouldn't be they wouldn't be hustling and not trying to integrate as much as possible. I will say this too, and again, I know this is a very unpopular opinion, but I know a lot of us have experienced this, and I think this again safe space for us as Canadians to talk about. But in addition to social cohesion, a really important part of this is personal hygiene. And personal hygiene needs to be discussed. And I know people don't want to talk about this because they feel like it's like this, it's such a personal matter. But, to steal a phrase, the personal is political. But, we can't ignore the social cohesion when there are norms that are being broken. Again, a norm being broken that I've seen more prominently amongst the South Asian international student community is personal hygiene. And I understand, to the best of my knowledge, I can't imagine working all day delivering packages for Amazon or Uber Eats or doing Uber and like, these jobs, you don't have a traditional office. You don't have a traditional place of work. So, where are you going to the washroom? Where are you going to get food to eat? Where are you going to get the things you need to function? When are your breaks? Where are your breaks? If the weather's bad, where is that happening? It's a whole thing. And so I get that. I totally get that. Um but there has to be, and this is the problem I think with the transactional nature um of temporary foreign workers. Again, they're thinking of Canada as a place just to get experience. There's not this like embrace of Canada, its culture, its people, etc. And I'll also say this too, like going back to the UK or European Union study, remember 31% of adults do not interact. Let me get the stat again. Sorry, before I mess this up. Where was it? 31% um, said something. I think it's really important for this discussion. Basically, it's like 31% do not interact with other races other than their own. I can't find it anymore. It's somewhere around here. Uh, so that's actually a really interesting indicator to show that, like, there's a willingness by adults to not interact with people outside their culture, and vice versa. I see a lot of international students, maybe they do feel shunned by us, maybe they do feel like othered by us because we do, as Canadians, as nice as we are, we do have a disposition to other people as well. So maybe they feel othered. Um, but I also don't see many really like engaging with Canadian culture and identity as well. I don't know what I mean by that, but like the friendly nature, the polite nature, the wanting to like engage nature. Again, maybe it's just my perception, but I don't see that as well. Um, And so, oh, here it is. The UK-based Belong Network found that 31% of adults rarely engage with people of different backgrounds, which leads to rising social fragmentation. And this is a top concern for the democracy as a whole. So, I think there's a couple things at play, and this is what the government didn't anticipate with their expanding of the temporary foreign worker program, their expanding of the international mobility program. I don't think the government anticipated first the number of people and then the lack of social integration and what that's doing in communities across Canada. Now, if you don't believe anything I say, just remember that Mark Carney and the Liberals, while they haven't announced anything really, I think they have mentioned that international students will be cut this year and into next year. And moving forward. And I'm sure the temporary foreign worker program will also be reduced too. So clearly, there are community members that are speaking up against some of the government's policies. Um, but that social integration, that social cohesion to me is that intersection. It's like, I get it. I understand why people hire temporary foreign workers, but the rate at which we're doing it here in Canada, the fact that temporary foreign workers are not leaving after 6 months to a year, they're leaving after many years, is leading to a lot of social cohesion issues. I'll tell you, I live downtown, I live near a grocery store, and I see the same guys delivering food that I did even 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe it's in my mind, like, but it feels like a very long time I've seen literally the same group of guys delivering food from this grocery store. I'm going to pause there. Let me know if you have any comments or questions in the chat. And I'll end this live stream by talking about the trade off. And again, it's a question I have for everyone in the chat. Let me know. But a real issue is unemployment amongst Gen Z, which right now is hovering around 12 to 13%, double what it is for working Canadians. Very interesting. I would love to know what all of you think about this, but this is a trade-off for some. Um, some say that these employers are hiring temporary foreign workers in replacement of Gen Z. I don't know that to be a fact. I haven't found anything to state that. I don't think there would be a report that would. But if you do have experience with this, let me know. I would be curious myself. So, folks, lots to unpack. I'm getting DMs every minute of every day, it seems, on this topic. Please keep sending them to me. I am very curious to see what you all are thinking. And if you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe. And folks, also go on my YouTube channel. You can find me, Christopher Balkerin. If you search my name on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. I upload all my podcasts, all my talks. It's a really great like smorgasbord of everything I'm trying to do here with my brand. But again, it's about openness and curiosity. And folks, if you stay on for just a little bit more, I'm going to share with you some research I recently did, and I'm actually quite scared to post this. But give me a second. But anyways, I'm just going to end the live on my YouTube. We'll continue it here on TikTok. Thanks again, everyone. We'll chat soon.